Today's parasha is called Parasha Korah. And what is Korah? Who is Korah? I subtitled it about, ego, the human ego, our personal interest, putting our personal interest above the national interest or above the congregational interest. So, any quarrel, say the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot 5:20, that is made for the sake of heaven shall in conclusion last. Any argument, any discussion, any quarrel that is made for the sake of heaven shall last. That's what is written in the Pirkei Avot. However, if the argument has selfish motivation, it shall not last. However, if this quarrel or if this discussion has a self-interest or selfish motivation, it will never last. The Mishnah offer Hillel and Shammai as an example of heavenly opponents. Their argument will last forever. These are two of our sages because they have different understanding, they have different view of seeing the Torah. But because these arguments are for the sake of heaven, their argument will forever last. But if this argument is for self-interest sake, it's just for a selfish motivation to see who is a better rabbi or who is a greater rabbi, their argument will never last. On the other hand, Korah and his congregation are the example given by those whose debates stem from egotistical motivation. Those type of disputes, say the Mishnah, are doomed to fail. When your motivation is self-interest, when your motivation is a selfish one, then your argument will never last. Then the Mishnah gave an example of this week Torah reading, the Korah. Because the argument of Korah with Moshe and Aaron was for what? Was for a selfish interest. Was for a selfish motivation. It wasn't for the sake of heaven. It wasn't for the sake of a larger picture. It wasn't for the sake of the nation. It was for the sake of his own personal pocket. The tragedy and difficulties that befell the Hebrew people in the desert of Sinai continue to multiply in the Torah reading of this week. As we can see from 3 weeks ago, we murmur, we ask for manna, we ask for meat, even though what we have meat. One problem. Last week we had the Parashat Shlach about the spice. They caused another problem, and now this week Korah came with his own problem. So it's as if we are just rolling from problem to problem, from problem to problem. It never stops. So this actually links us to what happened last week in Parashat Shlach, because we can see, according to the sage, we can see that actually those spies were actually brainwashed by Korah. Actually, Korah mistigated this people to give an evil report so that the people can return into Egypt. Because to him, Egypt is better than the promised land. Because he can be a slave lord over his own people. Because in the wilderness, they are all equal. In the wilderness, there is no farm, there is nothing for him. So to him, he is a kind of the so-called Wall Street. Those conglomerates, those transnationals, to them, everybody is a slave to their own wish. This week's sad story involved unique personality affected by human ambition, jealousy, and a complete misreading of one's true role in the family and society. Korah sees himself as being a far greater person than he really is. He is convinced that he is truly a rival to Moshe and Aaron, and is entitled to the same degree of leadership that they enjoy. What am I trying to say here? This man was what? Was a Levite. He was of those that have been called specially to stand before the Mishkan to serve in the Mishkan. But this man is not pleased with his own lot. He doesn't want to serve, but he wants to be the commander. And what is a true leader? A true leader is is a servant. He is not ready to do what? To take the yoke. He is not ready to carry the yoke of Moshe. Because Moshe and Aaron were carrying the yoke of the entire people upon their neck, upon their shoulders. But this man, Korah, is not interested in that yoke. To him, what is one is to sit down and start commanding. To him, it's that people say, hey, this is Korah, all those artificial respect. And start oppressing and commanding, and his own is not for the sake of the people, but his own for the sake of his own family and his pocket, as I said. He is not at all satisfied in being the head of one of the family of the Levites and performing the service in the tabernacle and temple. Such false leaders always surround themselves with other malcontents who are not interested who are also interested in destabilizing the leadership of the people for their own personal, psychological, material, and many times financial advantage. Moshe sent to call Dathan and Abiram, the son of Eliab, but they said, "We will not go up. It is not enough that you have brought us out of a land flowing with milk and honey to kill us in the desert, that you should also exercise authority over us. You have not even brought us to the land flowing with milk and honey, nor have you given us inheritance of field and vineyard. Even if you gouge out the eyes of these men, we will not go up." We can see from the statement of these two men, of the sons of Reuben, that actually what they want is their own personal interest. They are not interested in what the people, in what the congregation, in what the nation is facing. What they are interested in is their own personal interest. Listen again. It is not enough that you have brought us out of a land flowing with milk and honey. What do you mean? It is not enough that talking to Moshe, that Moshe took them out from the land flowing with milk and honey. Which land? So they are now saying that Egypt is a land that is flowing with milk and honey. That they took them out from the land of Egypt. These people forgot that they were slaves suffering in the land of Egypt. They were dying, they were being killed, murdered every time. And now, they now say it is a land that flows with milk and honey. You brought us out and bring us to this wilderness, in this desert, to kill us, to destroy us. And not only that, look at their statement. Nor have you given us an inheritance of field and vineyard. That Moshe have not given them. You see, have not given me. Everything is egoistic. It's about me, I, and nobody else. You have not given me vineyard. You have not given me a field to sow. So in Egypt, he is saying that they have vineyard, they have everything. These are the men that Korah has convinced that he actually can be the true leader. Before I continue, I would like to take us a little bit back to who is Korah. Who is this man? Korah was a very, very wealthy man. Today we call them a billionaire. Was a super rich man. And how did he make his money? I want us to understand this principle, this understanding. If you understand the background, then you can be able to understand the parasha. Korah made his money from the blood of his brothers. He was one of those Egyptian tax master. The Egyptian made him lord over his own people, to be putting them into slavery, and the Egyptians are giving him money. He sell and trade with the Egyptians, and now they are out of Egypt. That business is over. So how can I continue my empire? How can I continue my transnational? How can I continue my big huge company? Everything is all about profit, 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 profit. They don't think about human blood. Just like today that we are, just like this century that we are, many conglomerates, many transnational, they don't care about you or me. What they care about is about their profit. Everything is profit, profit, profit over human life, over human blood. If something happened to a worker today, if a worker died, they don't care. To them, it's a dollar sign. In a second, they employ another one. They won't even think about the family, about the people that man or that woman left behind, because to them they are not interested. Everything is about profit, profit, profit. How much can I accumulate in my bank account? That is who is Korah, or that is who Korah was. Moses saying, from here we learn that one should persist in a dispute, because Moses sought them out to reconcile them with peaceful word, said Rashi. This message is saying that Moshe, our teacher, Moshe Rabbeinu was really actually called them out. He was persisting in the dispute to call them. Let us come down together as a brethren. Let us talk. Let us find a solution to this problem. You said you don't like this, you don't like this, you don't like that. Okay, let's sit down and talk it over. Let's sit down and find a reasonable end to this dispute. If you don't like it, there is God. Let's go to God and let God judge. God will tell us who is wrong and who is right. I did not call myself. I did not come and say, I want to go to Egypt and do what? And deliver the people. Even though God told me, I said, no, I'm not interested, because I am happy with my wife and my children. I don't want to go to meet Pharaoh, because I know that he's seeking after my life. And God said, no, I'm sending you. Oh, no, look for another person. No, I'm sending you. No. You remember, I cannot speak. I'm a stammerer, I stagger. Among all those people down there are people that can speak very fluently. When they stand upon the stage and they begin to speak, everybody will say, oh man, this man speaks eloquently. Me, I am not like that. Please look for another person. God said, no, I'm sending you. So, it is not his wish that I go. Moshe was a reluctant leader. He doesn't want like, I want power, I want glory, I want this and that. No. He was built, he was put there by God himself. Can we have a greater example than this? Moshe Rabbeinu, our main teacher, is under attack, and is a deeply personal assault. His integrity and the veracity of the entire Torah is being challenged. How will he behave under pressure? He sent an invitation to two of the main instigators, Dasan and Abiram. Of course, they stiffened in their resolve to oppose Moshe. But we witness Moshe, who is the real target and the true victim, generously reaching out in a conciliatory fashion. Moshe was reaching out to this man. Say, please, come, let's talk. This does not need for us to destroy the Torah. This Torah that God has given us, it is really hard. God of all the heavens and earth choose us to give us His word, that we will be the light to the world. Why do we want to destroy it with our own hands? In every family, there is a Korah. In every congregation, there is a Korah. In every nation, there are Korahs. In every province and state, there are Korahs. These men or these women are there to just frustrate the leadership. Their job is not to contribute to the development or the welfare of the family or the state or the people, but their own is just for their own personal gain. They do not criticize constructively. Their criticism is always negative, destructive criticism. Why Moshe is seeking a constructive, a positive criticism. That doesn't mean that you cannot criticize your leadership. No, you can criticize your leadership, but what the Torah is saying that you should criticize your leadership constructively, positively. Let's look for a solution. Maybe there's something that is going on that is not right, or maybe there's something that is not going on the right way that you envision it. You can call your leadership, right, and say, okay, this is what I think that we can do to improve the situation. Of course, you sit down and talk and discuss. But when you come and say la 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 la, and come with that negative tone, of course, that is not right. Because to you, the most important thing is how to do what to benefit yourself personally, not the people. Rashi points out that this is a source for learning, that one should not persist in an argument or dispute. The sage noted that sometimes people do have a principal disagreement that can be healthy when in pursuit of the truth. After a short while, though, it becomes personal. Rashi is pointing out that yes, we can learn from the behavior and the character of Moshe. How Moshe handled the situation. Moshe did not just go out in self-defense and say, no. Moshe came out gently, as the Torah says. Moshe was the most humble man on the face of the earth. It was witnessed by God Himself, not by man. God said Moshe was the most humblest person that He knows on the planet. Moshe came out. Let us talk. Let us discuss. Anything that you disagree with, anything that you don't like, we can discuss it. We can make a change. We can make an amendment. We can improve. In the way things are done. But no, they make a resolve that what we want is a revolution. And although people are saying it is the principle of the matter, they really mean I am too much invested with my ego yield. So they dig in deeper. Hassan and Abraham did, and they convinced themselves and others they are warriors for a noble cause. That is the anatomy of destruction. These two men convinced themselves in their mind, convinced their children and their wives, convinced all the people that follow them that yes, we are standing for the right thing. We are doing the noble cause, because this man, Moshe, and his brother are enslaving us in the wilderness. In Egypt, we have everything. In Egypt, we have the land flowing with milk and honey. You remember they promised us that they're going to take us to the land of milk and honey. Where is the land? Nothing like that. We're in the wilderness, in the desert, dying, perishing, being tortured by the sun, by the snake, by the viper, by the scorpion. But Moshe and his brother are sitting down in the Mishkan, in the cool of the day, enjoying themselves, while we, the people, are suffering. They convince themselves in their mind that is what is actually happening. But actually that is not. You see, it is easy for you to lie unto yourself. It is said that we are our self-worst enemy. You know? It's one of the most well-known notion about our daily behavior at the end of every prayer and Kadesh. While backing up, we say Shalom Viruma, Yasem Shalom Aleinu, Viako Yisrael Vemro. Amen. Make peace on high. He will make peace upon us and upon all Israel. By backing up at that time, we are demonstrating that behavior that will make more certain that peace will be achieved. That is when every time at the end of Kaddish we say Shalom Ibrahim, we say Shalom Aleinu V'Yako Yisrael V'Ebro. Amen. Because he that make peace in the high places, make peace upon us and upon all Israel. Amen. Because peace is very, very vital. Peace is very, very important in any situation. In a country, in a state, in a home, in a province, in a family. Without peace, nothing can grow. Without peace, you cannot achieve anything. Even if all of you gather yourself together, if you don't have peace, everything will disintegrate. So peace is a vital key. Yielding to others is not always a sign of weakness. It is a sign, or it is often a symptom of strength. Yielding to others is not always a sign of weakness. People think that it talks to the rabbi and the rabbi yield. Not yield. Try to do exactly what he or she said. That means that the rabbi is weak. Or I told the rabbi this. And he yielded to my voice. The rabbi is weak. I want the rabbi to do this, he did it. I want the rabbi to do that, and he did that. Or I want my husband to do this, my husband did it. Or I want my husband to do that, my husband did that. Or likewise, you said, I want my wife to do this, and she did it. And I want my wife to do that, and she did that. Then you cannot take that as a sign of weakness. No, but actually, it's a symptom of strength, because it takes strength to go to bypass what you cannot bypass, to go over what you cannot. In your own personality, you say, for me, I will never do this, but for the sake of heaven, I'm going to do it. It shows strength. In every society, there are those who are dissatisfied with their lot in life. Their frustrations translate itself into episodes of anger and the vilification of others, especially of the leadership then present in that society. Revolutions are always popular, and those who lead them continually promise a new and better society, a utopia that unfortunately is never realized and usually turned into tyranny and the oppression of others. I can give you an example of a lot of revolutions. Let's take example the Red Revolution of the Russian Empire. The communists came. Say, the king is a bad man. The king is not good. Let's overthrow the king. We are going to make ourselves leader, and everything will be good. We are going to give you a lot of things, because these kings, they only take control of themselves or care for themselves, but they don't care for the masses. But after the revolution, what happened? The communists were even the worst. They were torrent. They abused the people. All the suffering, the people suffer even more under the communists than under the kings. These people will come to power to oppress and to destroy. It's always worse than the beginning. Let's look at the French revolutions. The same thing. The French people, no, we want a republic. Let's remove the king. The king is a bad man. La 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 la. The same thing happens. They remove the king. They got the republic. But what happened? Even though it was even worse than the kings. The people were suffering, and they suffer and suffer and suffer. Let's look at it, even the American Revolution. We don't want King George III. We don't want him. We don't want to pay homage to the crown. We need a republic. They fought and fought and fought, and they conquered the republic. And they said, we, the people. Who are the people? Who are we, the people? Of course, we, the people, are the slave owners. We, the people, are the billionaires of that time. They gathered themselves together to build a constitution for themselves, not for the masses, not for the people, to protect their slave trade, to protect their plantation. Not they don't give a damn about the masses. The people think that they say we the people, meaning everybody. No. We the people are the billionaires, those slave owners. And the same thing that mathematize to what is called Wall Street today. Greed and greed and greed and greed. They don't care about the ordinary people, they care about their own business alone. The army has become a private army where innocent people will be sent to war to go and die on behalf of the companies, not on behalf of the people. Not defending, they tell you we are defending our freedom. No, they are defending their own slave trade. They are defending their oil, and they are defending their pocket and their bank account. They are not defending no freedom. And these are the company, at the end, they will never pay tax. Only the people will continue to be suffering, and the middle class in America is wiped out. Then you are going to cry, how come Trump? Of course, that is the problem that the people are seeing. The people are suffering. The middle class is destroying. Then you start thinking, how did Trump got elected? Of course, the Trump will get elected because the people are tired of the system. The system is fed up onto the neck of the people, because the people are always a slave to the super rich who fight war all the time for their own benefit, not for the benefit of the people. The punishment, jealousy and dissatisfaction are always with us, no matter who our leaders may be and what type of society or social norm currently prevail. This frustration and dangerous arrogance always span further frustration, as the problem that is to be addressed is a personal one. There are no outside forces or governmental action that can truly solve this inner anguish. Truly, we are our own worst enemy. When people start jealousy, and they jealous the leadership. They say, oh, I wish I should be the one there. If I'm there, I can do this, I can do that. But they don't know the weight or the shoulders of the leaders, what the leaders are passing through. They think leadership is to command. No, leadership is to serve. A leader is a servant. The punishment visited upon Korah and his fellows is their complete elimination from society. Generally, it is as though the Torah is aware that there is no society or leadership that can really satisfy people who are professionally malcontent. It is not only individuals that are swallowed up and extinguished, but throughout history, it is recorded that idea, movement, political parties, and immoral social norm are also subject to extinction. The punishment visited by the Holy One, blessed be He, upon Korah and his cohort, shows us that these are it's like a virus. Why did God, the Almighty, took such a drastic action, took such a drastic step to eliminate this cancer from the society? We need to understand that this nation was a young nation. We were just being formed. We were forming up and we were growing up. And if there is a cancer inside it, the nation will never grow. The nation will never be developed. The cancer will destroy the people. The cancer of jealousy, the cancer of dissatisfaction, the cancer of Korah will consume the people. So that is why God took the drastic step to eliminate, to uproot, to destroy this cancer at the beginning, at the early stage, so that it does not do or spread onto the people. So because when they saw the action of God, the people begin to behave themselves. And they know that yes, indeed, God is the one that called Moshe and Aaron, that they did not call themselves. That all the things that they did, they didn't do it on their own, but by the power of the Almighty. This doesn't mean that this group, that this grouping will never again appear in society. They always do, but they do so in different forms and morph into changing mores. The Torah itself tells us that even though the original Korah may have been buried and disappeared, the descendants of Korah have not disappeared. Rather, they rise in every generation in different forms, victims of their own inner frustration, jealous of the accomplishment of others, and determined to turn over the entire apple cart in order to achieve their own aims. Human history and Israeli history is no exception to this phenomenon. It is littered with the debris of failed personal ambitions and unnecessary dispute and social divisions. We are bidding to learn and benefit from the mistake and folly of others. The Torah reading this week certainly has many important lessons to teach us about life, society, and human behavior. And likewise, the Haftorah of this week talks about Samuel. And we should understand perfectly well that Samuel was a descendant of Korah. He was a grandson of Korah. Samuel the Hanabi has appointed Shaul to be king, the first king of Israel. Samuel, who was a descendant of Korah, exhorted the nation to follow the way of Adonai. He criticized them for wanting a king, while at the same time pointing out that everyone, including the king, is subject to Adonai's law. You see, his forefathers, his great-grandfather rose up against the Torah, and the great-grandson was for the Torah. You can see sometimes how life works. In darkness, there's always a hope of light, like only that light. And in every light, there's a little point of darkness. It is balance. The nature, the things in life is balance. You can see that from the darkness of Korah came Prophet Samuel. And this is a man that stood firm for the Torah. He rebuked Israel for what they did, where he gave them a constructive criticism. It wasn't a destructive one. If you read the Haftorah perfectly well, he said, "You have done wickedly to do what? To request for a king, because you don't need a king, for God is our king. Why do you request for a king? What have you done evil before the eyes of the Lord?" But remember, the Lord will never reject his own. The Holy One will never reject his people, because he has called you to make you a special people unto himself. He will defend you, he will keep you, he will bless you, he will sustain you. Only keep the way of the Torah. If you and your king will keep the way of the Torah, if you and the king that you did what you choose over you will keep the way of the Torah, then everything is going to be okay. But if you and your king reject the way of the Torah, then you are doomed to destruction. And that is the agreement that we have on Mount Sinai. We said everything that you have said, everything that you said, oh Lord, we shall do what? We will obey, we will do. We are going to obey everything. That was our what? Our answer. And that answer can never be erased. We agreed on that day. So why come now? We are saying no. Well, we said yes. And that is why God is holding us accountable to our own action. God is holding us accountable to our words. We say yes, and we have to do it because we say yes. The connection of this week parasha is the fact that Samuel was a descendant of Korah. Whereas Korah expressed a right to interpret the Torah as he saw fit, Samuel tell the people that the success of the king and the nation is totally dependent upon their adherence to the letter of the Torah. In the end, it was Korah's own grandson who founded our nation leadership upon the unquestioned teaching of Moshe Rabbeinu. The Mishnah gave us a litmus test. How does one know when there is a validity to an argument? Only when it is an argument that envelops eternity. The argument of Shammai and Hillel lasts until today in the hall and classroom of yeshivas and synagogues across the world. Each one's view was not given for his own personal gain. It was argued for the sake of heaven. However, Korah's battle with Moses was not for personal gain, was one of personal gain. Moshe had no issue with them. It was battle of Korah and his cohort, each with a completely different motivation, himself. It did not last. A battle with divine intent remained eternal. In a healthy environment, there is a room for healthy differences. Korah's argument was not for the sake of heaven, but and pocket. The argument of Korah, even though Korah was a Levite, even though Korah was not a stupid man, understand? Korah said, and he took with himself 250 men. He said, men of renown. These are not stupid people. These are smart, well-learned students of the Torah. But they twisted the Torah in their own way. They interpreted the Torah in a selfish way. To do what? To motivate themselves. To gain for themselves, not for the nation. We have a lot of thousands of rabbis like that. Thousands of people in many synagogues. They will not tell the people the truth. They tell you only what you want to hear. They will not mention your crime and your sin. Oh, because Mr. A and Mr. B are sponsoring the synagogue, I will not tell them anything bad, even though if they are wrong. Because Madam A and Madam B are the main sponsor of the synagogue, I will keep my mouth shut, even though if they are doing something that is wrong. But that is not what God is saying. If somebody is doing, even though that man is the one that is sponsoring the synagogue, if he did something wrong, you rebuke him constructively, not destructively. Because if you rebuke him destructively, he will fall and you miss someone in the kingdom. But when you rebuke him constructively, point out to him what he or she did wrong, then ask him or her on how to come back. Show him on how to come back into the fold. Tell them how to make teshuvah. And by making teshuvah, they can come back into the fold. But Korah and his men, they were not ready for teshuvah. Their mind was made up. We need a revolution. We have to remove this man and we have to return back to what? To Egypt. Their main aim was to return back to Egypt so that he can continue to be the slave lord. He can continue to oppress his own people, making money and wealth on the blood of his own people. He doesn't give a damn. What he wants is his money. Just like what we're having in a society of today. So an argument for the sake of heaven will last. But any argument that is for a selfish interest, it will never last. Shabbat Shalom.